blow this up.
Look alive, Bomb Squad. We are back for another installment of Let's Blow This Up. I'm your host, Jason Sircone, and today we're talking podcast intros, the 2025 edition. And the reason why I'm putting a year on this is because I went back in the archives of my old podcast known as Podcast Theory. When I did this episode, it was known as Pod Theory. And I did an episode about making an intro. And it was good, but we're in a different place now. And that was a few years ago when I did that episode. I want to talk about this because I feel like it's one of those areas to where you have a lot of freedom. There's a lot of things you can do, but the most important thing that you have to keep in mind is your listener's attention span. And if there's anything that's changed a ton since I did that last episode, believe me, it's attention spans. I did a series on Podcast Theory when I was winding down that podcast where I was talking about attention spans. And when I did that series back in 2024, I came across a statistic that said that the average adult attention span is 8.25 seconds. Mind-blowing. But it speaks to how you need to snag somebody's attention in a few seconds. And there is a belief that you have more time with a podcast than you would if somebody's scrolling through Instagram or TikTok. And I do believe that, but I also don't believe that it's much longer. Meaning you need to get a person to the reason why they showed up for a podcast as soon as possible. If you've got too much fluff before you get to the meat of that show, you're going to lose them because you're not answering the question that they want answered. They have a problem. You're showing that you have a solution. They're clicking play, but if you're not getting to that solution, then they're not experiencing the reason they showed up. Therefore, they bounce. With your podcast intro, I think a lot of the standard is that you have this worded out intro that tells the story about what the podcast is all about. In essence, I think the mindset is that the intro has to validate why a listener tuned in. And I want to reverse engineer that today because I think it's different now. If you're going to listen to my show, it's because I grabbed your attention with a good headline, a good description. And my goal, once I did that and you click play, is to get you to the reason you showed up immediately. I don't want to have a long list of things that we need to talk about from a housekeeping perspective. I don't want to talk about last week's episode. I don't want to talk about this, that, and the other. Fuck the weather. We're not talking about that either. You came here for a reason. I want to get you to that reason. You click play on this episode because you want to learn how to make a better podcast intro. Let's talk about how we're making a better podcast intro right out of the gates. Now, in a solo environment, that's a little easier because I'm not having anybody else that I'd want to bring in and potentially introduce, but that's something to reverse engineer as well. What I've done on my conversation-based shows or conversation-based episodes is I've started diving into the heart of the conversation first. We talk about their story and what they do throughout that episode, and you're going to get to learn that. But the main reason why you showed up, it's gotten to in the first couple of minutes. And to me, that's where I feel attention spans are. I know firsthand, and this is my own consumption habit, if I ever hear a podcaster say we're going to get to some housekeeping first, I'm done. I'm out. I don't want that. That's not why I came. I don't want to hear that. Tell me why I showed up. Bring me to the value now. We want it now, damn it. And that's attention spans in 2025. So if you're doing an intro to your podcast that's a minute long, minute and a half long, and you're verbalizing why a person should be listening to this, you don't need to do that because you don't need your intro to validate why a person's listening to your show. Let your content do that. Instead, do something quick, something that could be a little upbeat. Look at the intro for Let's Blow This Up. I literally say, let's blow this up. That's that's me. I just let the cat out of the bag. That's my voice muffled. But it's quick. It's got some impactful music, and we get into the show within a few seconds, 15 to 20 seconds. We're rolling, baby. That's what it's all about now, because I know that you've got a lot to do today. And you've only got X amount of minutes to dedicate to listening to Let's Blow This Up. So I want to make sure that you get everything out of this. And to keep you here till the end, I want you to experience something good from start to finish. And if I don't get you to the good stuff first, the likelihood of you sticking around till the end is gone. I realized this when I was first sitting down to make Let's Blow This Up in 2024. I was in that same trap of my podcast intro needs to be XYZ. And believe me, I've gone back on old shows and listened to some of the intros I've done. It's cringe. It's very cringy. It was very unnecessary. And even the way I delivered it was just, bleh. But I felt like that's what we were doing. This is what podcasts were. And as I was writing out this worded intro, it just hit me. Dude, this isn't necessary. Something quick, something impactful, get them to the show. Get them to the reason they showed up. Now, I've talked about this before on the show. I draw a lot of parallels with podcasting from television. And I think about where TV themes were in the 80s and 90s. Think about back to your shows that you watched back then. They were long-winded. They had music. Some sang, some didn't. Like the Cosby Show is popping into my head right now. Think about all of the characters that were on the Cosby Show. They were all in that main theme as that saxophone played. And it was that good Cosby Show song imitation. I was trying, but it was like over a minute long before it was over. But that's what we expected back then. Fast forward. And actually, before I fast forward too far, the last one that I'll really give credence to that I don't care how long it is, I will sit and watch it. It's The Sopranos. That theme played a role in getting you pumped up for the show each and every time you watched it. It was well over a minute long. And it was just Tony Soprano driving through Jersey, but it really set the tone for what that show was all about. But did it need to be that long? Probably not. And whether it served a purpose or not, most people skip the intros. How do I know this? Go to any streaming service and put on a show, and any intro has the skip intro option at the bottom. The show that really changed the mindset and the thinking for me was Breaking Bad. When that first came out, it was, early 2000 teens. I can't remember the exact time. I think 2013-ish. But that theme song was like 10 seconds long. It had the title, it had some smoke, it had who created the show, and that was it. And then you were into the show. And all of those names that you used to see on a theme that was a minute or longer were now at the bottom of the screen. So you're into the show. That's why you showed up. You didn't show up for the theme. You showed up for the show. Give me my story. But you can still see the names at the bottom, and they're still getting their credit for being a part of that show. So with your podcast, why do you feel the need to have a minute and a half long intro when you can just do something quick, impactful, something that welcomes a listener to the show? Welcome to my show where we talk about XYZ. Let's get to it. Why can't it be that short? Think about what your listener is showing up for. Are they showing up for a long-winded intro, followed by a long monologue, followed by housekeeping, followed by ads, followed by whatever you could insert for 15 to 20 minutes before you get them to the heart of the reason they showed up? Or are they showing up for good content? And that you got them to come for that good content because you put a great episode cover together, because you have a great title that grabs their attention, because you have show notes that accurately describe what they're going to experience. You don't need to validate that your content is good with this long-winded intro. You just need to get the person that's listening to the reason they showed up as fast as possible. Period. That's it. And the reason why I said you would thank me is because this is going to put some time back on your plate when it comes to the intro. Because for one, in creating the intro, yes, you only have to do it once. So it's not a ton of time, but I'm trying to help you out here. But think about the listener that's now invested in your show. They tuned in, they saw an episode that grabbed their attention. They love what they heard. What else do they have in the catalog? They're going back. They're listening to past episodes. They're subscribing so they can get new episodes. They're in the game now. They want to be part of your show. Do they need to hear that validating intro each and every time they turn on your show? Of course not. They know they're here. So now your loyal listeners are being put through something they're more than likely they're hitting skip on. So what's the point? Why break your back coming up with a well-worded intro if it's just going to get skipped anyway? Live streaming TV services have put this thought in people's minds, and I guarantee a long-winded intro, especially for a long-time listener. Don't get me wrong, they're not mad. They're just saying, why do I need to listen to this? I know what they're going to say. I just want to listen to this week's show. Click, click, click. They're beyond your intro into the heart of the matter. That's where the magic happens. So think about how you're using that intro, but think about your listener's experience from start to finish. They find your show. They like what they see from a cover art perspective or the title of the show, even the name of your show. If they've never heard of you before, that may grab their attention. The show notes accurately describe what's happening, or maybe you have a brief summary before it even gets in the show notes. You've done your job to captivate a person to press play. Once they're there, they've gotten to that point, this is where you want to make sure you're keeping their ass in the seat. And the only way that you're going to do that is if you give them good content to keep coming back to. Now, I'm not saying that a long intro is going to make a person say, I'm out, but it could. Depending on how low that attention span is, they might say, oh, God, is it ever going to happen? Maybe not. Gone. I'm going to the furthest extreme with this, but when you think about it, it's not that extreme. When you go back to that statistic that I said a moment ago, 8.25 seconds for adult attention spans in 2024. I mean, how many months have passed since that statistic was found? It might be even worse now. We're not getting any better, that's for sure. But think about this from that big range perspective, the wide angle lens of your podcast. Is a long-winded intro really needed? Is a worded out intro really needed? Can you get the point across in 10 to 15 seconds that this is what my show is? This is what it's called. This is what you're going to learn today. Let's roll. Let your content validate the reason why that listener showed up and then continues to show up. That's where the magic is. That's what people are coming for. They want good content. They're not going to give a damn about your intro. And I guarantee you, if it's a long one, they're probably skipping it anyway. So do not break your back on this. Do what's necessary. Do something that's fun, that's impactful, that grabs attention, but it doesn't have to last 20 minutes. That's a big exaggeration. If your intro is 20 minutes, we have a whole different problem on our hands. But the longer intros that are usually over 45 seconds to a minute long, sometimes even longer, maybe time to scale that back and think about getting your listener to the content as fast as possible. They're going to thank you. You're going to thank me because, again, you don't have to break your back on an intro. But overall, it's all about listener experience, right? We want to make sure we're getting our listener to the reason they showed up as fast as possible. And if you can trim some time off that intro, you're going to make that happen. So with that, we are going to close down this episode of Let's Blow This Up. I hope you had a great time, because I know I did. I'll be back next Thursday with another solo episode for you to consume. And of course, we've got plenty of great episodes in season 3 already released that you can jump back in the archives and check out, or jump back to season 2 and season 1. There's some great content there as well. We got plenty more to come your way. So if you're not following, if you're not subscribed, make sure you click that button on your favorite player or on YouTube so you know when new episodes go live. Please don't be a dick about this. Until our paths cross again on the next episode of Let's Blow This Up, my name is Jason Sircone, and until we meet again, stay explosive.